Hello everyone, so this video is going to demonstrate how to make a sourdough starter using an organic rye and distilled water. In addition to that, I'm going to add in a whole white wheat and a rye flour starter just to see what the difference is. The first step to making a starter is to know how much your jars weigh. This is going to be beneficial down the road as you continue to keep your starter active and alive and you're feeding it for pretty much as long as you want to keep it. It can live forever. Day one, the first step to making your starter. You want to do equal portions of water and flour. I started with 50 grams of each. If your measurements are over by a gram or two, it's not that big of a deal. You can just add a little extra flour or a little extra water so that it continues to be equal parts. Once you get all that together, you're going to want to mix it and clean your jars and put the lightly fitting cover on top and let it sit in a warm place until the next day. My house is normally around 70, 71 degrees, but to make sure that I'm storing it in a warmer place, I do tend to keep these next to the stove just because that's typically a warmer spot in the kitchen. The important part about getting a starter going is to have warm temperature and a really good flour. So in this case, this organic rye King Arthur flour is working out amazing. You'll also see in the second starter that I have going on here, which is the white whole wheat flour mixed with organic rye, that is also going to be high in protein and very active. These starters will take about a 7 to 10 day process to get to its full mature state. During the development stage, your starter is going to have several different aromas coming off of it. Day 1, day 2, very little. Day 3, day 4, it might almost have a rotten smell. Don't worry, that goes away. And eventually you'll develop that perfect sourdough smell that everyone desires. When letting your starters sit overnight, you do want to cover them, but you want a very loose fitting lid. You see here, I just simply set it on top. It's okay for air to get in there. So we're into day 2. Here we're going to add another equal parts 50 grams of water and 50 grams of flour to each of the starters. On day 2 of this video, I decided to add in a new element to the starter test, and this one is going to use 100% rye flour mixed with spring water because I was reading some folks had said distilled water doesn't work, and frankly I was 2 days in and I wasn't sure if we were going to see any results. So for an experiment purpose, I added it in, and we'll continue to feed it throughout its 7 to 10 day development. Day 2 feeding completed, and as you see here, I added some rubber bands, mainly just for demonstration purposes so you can see as the starter grows. Remember, when storing your starters overnight, you do want to put them in a warmer spot in the house. Here, that's in my kitchen. This guy, that is my 2-year-old starter I have had going on. I'm just had it out because I was making some bread the other day. On to day 3, and look at that, guys. The distilled water with the flour has a rise. It's about double in its size. Isn't that exciting? And here's the spring water test. This is only day 2, so you can see a little rise, but not much. For day 3, we're going to add another 50 grams of water, 50 grams of flour. Mix that together, adjust your rubber band, put your lid back on, and store it in a warm place. Here we are moving into day 4, and guys, look at this. The distilled water starter is still doing an amazing job here. It is a day behind the spring water one, but I still feel that there's a faster rise with it. So much so that I decided to do a secondary test with a new bottle of distilled water, and still it is continuing to rise at an amazing rate. Well, anyhow, this was just to kind of rule out any issues you might have with distilled water. This guy right here, I'm not going to continue through the process. It was just put in there as a quick little test. For day 4 feeding, we're going to do something a little different here. We're actually going to add 100 grams equal parts water and flour to the first 2 starters. The spring water test is still on day 3, so that's just going to be 50 grams for that one. But the first 2 with distilled water, it is 100 grams each. Mix, put the lid on, adjust your rubber band, and store in a warm spot. Day 4 feeding time is always fun to watch because you get this huge pop in the starter rise because you have so much flour already in the containers. The one that is gone super crazy is the half and half rye and wheat. Second is the 100% rye, but I guarantee you it will be rising up just as much in an hour or so. And then we have the spring water test, which is a day behind. So it's not an apples to apples comparison here, but it's still fun to watch. Day 5 feeding time. You'll start to notice the starter will rise and fall on the jar, leaving a little bit of smudge behind. That's perfectly normal. But I really want to talk about today is temperature. Let's go ahead and read the temperature of each of these. The first one here, that's right around 76. Ideal temperatures for starters are going to be between 70 and 76 degrees. If yours are coming in less than that, you're going to notice a slower fermentation process and rising process, and you'll likely need to go a few extra days longer. Remember when you're adding water to your starters to always use room temperature water. Anything cold is just going to slow your whole process down. So as you can see here, temperature is key to getting that starter going. Okay, so now we're moving into day 5 feeding process. For the 2 distilled water starters, this will pretty much be the repeat process for the rest of its existence. We're going to, I know, don't have a heart attack, but we're going to remove all that starter with the exception of 70 grams. And then we're going to add 100 grams of water, 100 grams of flour, and that is its repeat feeding cycle until you decide you no longer want to keep it active. If you remember on day 1, we weighed each of these jars while they were empty. This is where this comes into play, is because you basically want to take the original empty weight of the jar plus 70 grams, and that is going to be your starting weight that you're going to want to get down to after removing all of the starter. Because I have 3 starters going on here, you're going to see a lot of waste that's coming out of them. There are some folks who might want to try to make a little quick recipe with it. I don't really bother with that. I just kind of throw it away because it's kind of a one and done. Once the starter is active, you're not actually throwing that much out. And typically when I am pulling the starter out, I am putting it into bread, so it's not very wasteful. Let's watch the difference in the rise between the starter that's a day behind on day 4 and these that are on day 5, which is going to be your normal repeat process for the rest of the starter's life. It has been a busy week keeping these guys on track, but now here we are on day 6 and 7. All the starters are on the same schedule, which is we're going to remove all but 70 grams of the starter in the jar. Then we're going to add 100 grams of fresh water and new flour. Like I said before, that is the repeat schedule. I think these guys look like they are ready to start the bread making process, but I'm going to give them another few days of starter feeding just to help develop a little bit more of that sour taste. In the beginning, the starters I always feel are more mild, but as they do age, that sourness becomes a little bit stronger over time. I have to put these little guys to rest now that they are ready to go because I'm out of rye flour, so I cannot do any more feeding, or I can't make any bread. But they are ready to go. They have rise and fallen several times. They have a nice sour aroma. They're going to continue to get more sour. You can keep them in the refrigerator, ideally only a week, and then take out for a feeding, or take out, make some bread and feed it. It can go 2 weeks max in the fridge. But until I get some more flour, the starter tests are done and completed.